Model Making Guru is sponsored by emodels.co.uk. Make something awesome. Hey everyone, it's Fox from modelmaking.guru here, and welcome to another Tabletop Trauma Centre. In this episode, we continue the Lehman Russ restoration, rescuing it from the slough of potato-painted despond in which it had languished for probably over 20 years. Last time, I got the base camouflage scheme sorted out, and in this episode, it's time to get everything else blocked out and painted up, ready for weathering. Now, if you excuse me, I hear security coming, and I think it's Gladys, the big scary one with the muscles like an armful of pit bulls and the wandering eye. Oh. Okay, so I'm starting with the big honking dozer blade, which I'm adding as a personal retro Warhammer touch to this build rather than just leaving it as the original camo colours. As you can see, it will have black and yellow stripes, and I'm going to start by blocking in the yellow colours. I'm starting with Avalan Sunset, a lovely yellow base colour. Now, Citadel base paints are more opaque than the layer paints, and so to avoid me having to apply batrillions of coats to get a nice solid yellow layer over the dark green that's underneath, the base paint will keep it down to 1 or 2 coats. It is important that I'm basing the whole blade in yellow first and not black. You should never ever block in the black first, as many colours, yellow especially, are transparent to a certain degree and look terrible over black or very dark colours, unless you paint lots and lots and lots and lots of coats, even with base paints, so always base in the lighter colour first. I'm using my wet palette as ever, and I've added just the tiniest amount of water to the paint in addition to the moisture from the palette. You can see here that the first coat of yellow is transparent and streaky, and that's fine, because now I'll go in with a second coat to make it more opaque. Because I thinned the paints, this doesn't add any real texture and keeps the paint surface nice and smooth. It's better to paint with multiple thinner coats like this, rather than just one big fat sloppy coat straight from the pot. This way, you can increase the opacity without leaving stodgy brush marks or smothering all the tiny surface details and recesses. The original painter of this model just blapped one coat of raw paint on, which left hella brushy marks everywhere and streaks where the paint was less thick. Basically, it looked terrible. This will help to avoid that. To paint the stripes, I like to mark out roughly where they're going to be with a pencil. It's important to get good symmetry with something like stripes, because no matter how neatly you paint them, if they're all wonky and different sizes and not symmetrical and not lined up, it's just going to stand out a mile and it's going to invalidate all your hard work because it's the first thing people will see. A little bit of prep will save corrections later. If you're super confident, you can skip this step. Now it's time to outline the stripes, and I'm using Abaddon Black for this. I have the paint a little thinner than I normally would here because at this stage opacity isn't important at all, but it is critical that I don't add any height. I don't want a raised line of paint where the black stripes are. Now you'll note that these lines are very scruffy and not straight. That's fine. They're only a rough guide. There'll be much back and forth cleanup later on. Once I'm happy with the outlines, I go ahead and fill them in again with the paint thinner than normal just to preserve that smoothness. Once all the black is loosely blocked out, it's time to tidy up and straighten out the edges by going back in with the Avalanche Sunset. You can see the stripes are still streaky and patchy here, but that's fine, there's more to come. Now, this is what I talked about in the last video, something you don't often see in tutorials. Often when it looks like a painter has just painted awesomely neat freehand lines, they probably didn't, and most likely they went back and forth again and again off camera, correcting and cleaning up, so you just see the awesome paintwork at the end. Now I can go in with the Abaddon Black again and add another coat to the stripes. I do have the paint still thinned a little more than normal here, purely because Abaddon Black is quite known for being a bit prone to brush marks, and building up thin layers to block it out is the best option here. I am also doing more back and forth correction where any of the last yellow work needs tidying up. Next, there's an optional step to add a little flair to the hazard marks. I'm going in with a shade called Cassandra Yellow. This will do three things. It'll tint both the yellow and black and take down the contrast between them and help blend them together a little. It will help smooth the edges between both colours, and it will also help enhance the concavity of the blade. After the first all-over coat, I go back in with the Avalanche Sunset to lighten the lower parts of the blade. It's a little optical shenanigan. By concentrating the shade at the top of the blade and keeping the bottom lighter, it enhances the way you see the shape. What I'm doing here is I'm applying the shade, then cleaning off the brush, dampening it with water and feathering the edge of the shade back to the top. It's just simply called feathering. The hope is it'll create a smoother transition, a smoother fade between the shaded area and the non-shaded area, rather than just having an obvious strike between shade and non-shade. It's quite a subtle method, but it really helps get good transitions if you're brush painting and not using an airbrush. Once the striping is done, it's time to block in the parts of the model that need to be metallic, and I'm using Leadbelcher. I'm not using the wet palette here because the metallic flakes can get into your wet palette and contaminate all the other colours on there. It's not just a Dota blade, there's that big Lucius pattern las cannon. Both the Vox unit antennae in details. The entrenching tools on the back and in the stowage bin. The odd, I don't know what they are meant to be bottles on the rucksack and the knife hilt. The las guns in the stowage bin, these will have differently coloured casings, but it's easy just to paint the whole thing Leadbelcher for the moment. The two sponson-mounted Griffin 4 pattern heavy bolters, again, these will have different coloured casings, but for now it's easier to paint it all this colour. All the little grabby handles, which I like to paint bare metal to make them more interesting. The doodads on the back of the searchlight. And the metal clamps around the tubes on the back of the turret. Next up, I'm painting those tubes using Avalan Sunset again and Mechanica Standard Grey. I'm using grey on the fat cable because I want it to look like rubbery cable, but like I said in the last episode, you should avoid painting black things actual black. This way I'll be able to get a black wash into the recesses later. I apply a base coat of Zandri dust to the rucksack to give it that nice canvas colour. The wooden parts of the entrenching tools get a coat of XV88. It's a deep colour, but I will lighten that up later to look more like tool wood. One of my favourite Citadel paints, Retributor Armour. This is for the Aquilean skulls on the tank. I've popped down to the smaller 3/0 broken-toed brush for this finery. I take my time. The crisp moulding makes it easier to get nice, precise edges, but if your edges come out with little tiny wobbles or bleps or are ever so slightly uneven, don't panic. We're adding a shade in a bit that will hide all those crimes. That's how shades do. Like the Leadbelcher, I'm not using the wet palette here as the metallic flakes will contaminate the palette and it will affect how the paint flows. Now, I hear tell a rumour that the white top paints are more expensive because they have actual fancy metal flakes in them like silver and such, and allegedly Retributor Armour has actual gold in it. Allegedly. Next up, I apply Rhinox hide to the exhaust stacks. These will eventually be made to look rusty, and a dark reddy brown is a good base to work from. It's often easier to work from dark to light with rusty things. Now I crack out the Ammo by MiG zinc chromate yellow for the interior of the hatch. In World War II, aircraft and sometimes tank interiors were not painted, but instead had a more durable coating of zinc chromate to protect against corrosion. Although naturally yellow or yellow-green, later in the war light green pigments were added to the zinc chromate to prevent eye strain amongst crewmen. But I like to think that the Astra Militarum are so disposable that they don't need to worry about such things, and so they get bog standard yellow zinc chromate interiors. Now I need to start on the tracks, and for this I'm basing with Vallejo Panzer Aces track primer. Now some folks start with the silver colour as the tracks are made of metal, but I like to make my tracks worn and corroded and caked in dirt, so it's better to start with the dark browny colour, again going from dark to light. This way, when I do add metallic highlights later on, they'll look like areas where the metal has rubbed clean and shiny. Time to pick out some details now with Mechanicus Standard Grey and Gawthor Brown. The Gawthor Brown is for the leather sheath for the combat knife. The Mechanicus Standard Grey is to add a dark grey base to the casings of the lasguns. I'll leave the metal parts of the weapons in lead belcher. Now you can paint the casing whatever colour you like to fit with your troop colour scheme, but I felt a traditional green colour would just blend into the tank camouflage. Now it's shady time again. Now that we've based everything, we need to add depth to it to make it all come alive. I start with Nuln Oil all over the entrenching tools. All over the lasguns. All over the Vox unit and antennae. Into the grille here to give the recesses nice depth. And all over the bolters. Now Nuln Oil is a perfect dark oily wash that helps make silver parts look more three-dimensional and more like metal and less like something just painted a silver colour. Note how I've previously painted the casings. This wash will make them look like the rest of the hull colours. All over the las cannon. The exhausts. The tubes and metal attachment points. Grab handles. And searchlight doohickeys. I've not washed the dozer blade because that will be dealt with later, and washing it now is pointless. Now I go over the backpack with Agrax Earthshade, a warm brown dirty wash. The Nuln Oil will be too dark here. I want to suggest shadows and highlights in the tan coloured canvas, and Agrax is perfect for that. It's also a good colour for gold to darken the recesses and give a dirty gold effect. Note here how I'm carefully making sure the shade goes around the outside edge of the gold area. This makes the object look separate from the background, like it's something mounted on the surface, and looks much more realistic. It's also hiding any areas where the edge is not quite so straight or neat. Shades hide all your sins. After all that shading, it's layering time. I go back to Zandri Dust and Mechanicus Standard Grey to lighten up the areas that have just been darkened by the shades. However, I am careful to avoid the recesses that I need to remain darker. This will add even more depth. On the rucksack, I'm trying to create lighter highlight areas that blend smoothly into the darker recesses, and so have the paint thinned a tiny bit more than normal, sticking to the raised areas and avoiding the recesses. I'm also using the brush to my advantage. More paint is placed where the brush stroke ends, so you can be clever and ensure that your strokes end in the areas you need the highlight. Now I use Karak stone to add lightness to the entrenching tool wood. It's quite thin and I'm using fine scratchy strokes to suggest a wood texture. This will also be applied a tiny amount to the rucksack on the sharpest of edges as a second highlight colour. And with that done, that's all the base colours that can be done at this stage applied. There are still a few small details that will need painting and more highlights for some things, more work on the gold for example. And I have the searchlight and periscope lenses and such too, but these all need to be done after the weathering, which I'll start in the next episode. Remember, we were still just blocking in the base colours here. We needed to get everything on the tank coloured in before we started even thinking about chipping and weathering. That's the beauty of these armour kits. There's often not that much to actually paint beyond the overall camouflage scheme. But that's going to do us for this time. Thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed it, please like and subscribe, and remember you can help support the channel and keep it alive by becoming a patron at patreon.com/modelmakingguru, or by clicking the join button under any of my videos. Patrons and members get ad-free early access to much of my content, so sign up today. Anyway, go make something awesome, go be awesome, and until next time, adios amoebas.